So I'm Cooper, and I've been working on Outchasers for the last 3 years. Last year, Comic-Con was really this awesome event for me. It was the first time I ever showed the game publicly. The reaction was just so amazing. You know, people really, they wanted to buy the game right there. They wanted to just take it home with and it just really inspired me. Originally, I had planned for this to be just, you know, an exercise in game design, you know, just trying to do something to show off my skills that I could actually do it. But then the reaction at Comic-Con, and then subsequently all of the rest of the conventions that I ended up going to last summer, just convinced me that I should really be pushing this to like a professional level. You know, I really want to see it be as good as it can be. I'm just so encouraged by your guys' support and you know how much you guys really liked it that I want to get it there for you guys. This is a video series that I'm gonna do to do a little bit of history, you know, tell you what I've gone through in the past year making this game, all the cool changes we've done, give you an insight into the, you know, the game design, the process, some of the tools I've used, show you some concept art, and give you some free stuff along the way. So it's always been a dream of mine to make a game. I've always been into game development, but I decided to start with a paper game so I wouldn't be programming and screwing things up in code before I had a good game. So I decided to make a card game, and the first person I thought of to go to was a friend of mine named Nick Grieco. So Nick and I had met in college, we both went to music school together, and he lived in Boston and I lived in Colorado. So to start working on that game, we had to use computers and play online. So to do that, I made a bunch of terrible, really ugly cards, and then made a plug-in for a program called Lackey, and then we would play each other online over and over and over, trying out new ideas, fixing things that were broken, and for a whole year testing that just between us. Throughout the process, he was living in Boston and I was living in Colorado, so we had to find different ways to work together. So we spent a lot of time on Skype. We spent a lot of time using a program called Lackey, where I would make a program and I'd make a bunch of really, really terrible looking cards in Photoshop. And then I built a plugin for Lackey, and then we could play each other over and over. So originally, I had started with the idea of making sort of a JRPG game, almost Final Fantasy, in a card game that would sort of play itself. And that turned out to be a terrible idea. It was horrible. So I kept working with him, and we eventually, you know, kept shifting, and we ended up landing on, you know, just a 1v1 straight up strategy card game. So some of our first designs, we had started with resources, and we were doing something like lands and magic, and what we had done was we'd split out the resources into a separate deck. So you had resources and you had equipment, and you could draw from either deck. On your turn, you get to draw 2 cards, and you get to pick which deck they come from. And that was before we'd played Force of Will, before Force of Will was a huge thing. But we could just not make that work at all. It was just really not an interesting decision at all. It made resources really boring for us. So while we were designing, Nick and I would meet, you know, once a week, and then we'd work on our own. And then we'd meet once a week again and play the game, play what we had. And then eventually we got to a point where we pretty much we were happy with the design, and we thought we should start working on art. And I had met Brett Nienberg through a friend of mine. His art is just incredible, and I thought he was amazing. He had been involved in the game development community in Colorado for a long time. So I decided to reach out to him and just see what he said. And at first he was a little unsure about who I was or what we were going to do, but eventually I convinced him. We ended up working together. And his art is just incredible. I'm so thankful to have him on the project. Then we started working on concepts, and we went through a lot of really dumb ideas at first. I was thinking we would do some like part animal people, and we would do all sorts of weird stuff like that. But we would talk to him once a week, and then we'd tell him what we were thinking, and then he'd do drawings, and then they, you know, email it to us on Tuesday, and I'd be, you know, waiting at my email like a kid on Christmas. I was super psyched to open that because I'm just the biggest fan of his, and I love all the stuff that he does. So every day in that time period was just so exciting. So after we'd spent about a year on it, Comic-Con was the first time we showed it publicly. We'd have some friends play it here and there, and they seemed encouraging, but I think you don't know if you have something good until a stranger plays it and isn't afraid to tell you that it sucks. So Comic-Con was the first time we showed it, and it was funny because I had, not a big company, it's just me and some friends making this game, so I was trying to wrangle my girlfriend and her family to come help and run the booth and teach people the card game, just as many people as we could get. It ended up being really fun. We had 3 different places you could play, and we played the game over 100 times that weekend, and it was just really cool. I mean, there were people who got our t-shirts and would wear them the next day. There were people that were coming back, and just every day to play again or to show their friends. There's kids who would pick up the cards and just stare at the art and just be in awe. And that's how I feel when I get the art back from Brett. But it's also how I felt when I was a kid, looking at cards. I used to play Magic and Mech Warrior and Star Wars, and I would really just love the art and love just thinking about the design, thinking about how I would make decks, and just really the fantasy of it. And that was one of my favorite things, was to see that I could give that to someone else, give that feeling to them. So I was really, really excited about that. There were some really fun kids that came by and hung out with us, and we ended up really getting to know a few people, because there's a lot of people that would come back every day and play with us every day, or even most of the days. I mean, there was one kid who came back every single day, and he was wearing our shirt the whole time and just loved it so much. And we were really excited, to have someone like that. Talking with people like that really helps the game, and together we come up with things and fix problems, and it's been a real creative process, help with people throughout the testing process, and I'm really thankful that everyone's helped us so much, and I think the game's a lot better for it. But it was really fun to have people like that and get to know them. I mean, there's one kid who came every day, you know who you are, but he said our game is modest, and that was something that I'd been focused on with the art from the beginning. Was I really wanted to make a game that anyone could play, a family-friendly game, and it was really cool to see that. With a lot of games, it seemed like his family wasn't going to let him play a lot of the more popular games out there because of how they treat the art and how they treat women and stuff like that. And I just with that, I really wanted to portray strong female characters, strong male characters, and just and something that's all ages, and that was really cool. But really the list goes on and on with people we met. There were 2 guys I met and ended up skipping them in the line. We had a wait list to play the game, and we were texting people, and we ended up texting them that they had a spot, and then we filled the spot before they got there. And so luckily they weren't super mad, and they hung out and ended up playing, and then ended up staying after, and I really started to get to know them. But it turns out I was actually in college with one of them and didn't even know. But we became pretty good friends, and they ended up helping me at some of the next conventions, and then ended up teaching people the game, and kind of joining on our team, and really did a ton of testing, and I'm really thankful that I met them. Yeah, they're really great guys. It was really fun being at Comic-Con, and I was so surprised by how great the reaction was. There were people wanting to take pictures with me because I designed the game. There was a group of kids from Wyoming, and one of the kids works at a pizza shop, and he said I have free pizza for life if I come in. I do plan on going to that pizza shop and getting some free pizza. I haven't yet, but I will. There were some other times with testing, coming up with ideas when you play the game, 10 times, 20 times. You come up with some weird ideas, some permutations. So it was at Comic-Con that we came up with the idea to do 2 pilots and 1 mech, which we called the Atlantic Rim. It's Atlantic Edge. Atlantic Edge expansion, the version. So that's actually in the official rules. So that was really fun. I thought I'd go into a little bit of my process and what I've done throughout developing the game, and just talk a little bit about the tools I've used, and what I've had to go through to make what it is today. So I started making just terrible drawings in Photoshop, and that's been the tool I've used throughout the whole time. And I would recommend, if you ever want to make a card game, that Photoshop's really what you should be working in. And it's really powerful. Even if you just have the basic skills, you can learn a lot of cool stuff and really, make some cool things. What I did is I would make JPEGs, just draw up cards and write on them. And then I would load that into into Lackey at first. But then I would have to redo those cards basically every week. I was redoing about 50 cards at least, and our whole set turned out to be 72. But at some points we had more than that, and I would have to go through individually and make changes on each of those image files, which was a huge pain. So then what I did is I ended up learning about how to use data sets in Photoshop. That is really, really cool if you ever get involved in making a card game. So what you can do is you can make a spreadsheet, and then you take that spreadsheet and then you assign each column to a variable in Photoshop, and then you can load in those variables. So then basically it'll pop up the card and you can click next through your spreadsheet and it'll load all the values and change it every time. So that's really cool. And then from there you can just export files, export the data set as files, and then that will just output. So I was doing about 72 cards just by changing a few things in a spreadsheet, and then I would load the variables and then export the files and just export 75 cards at once or so. Saved me a ton of time after I'd wasted a ton of time doing all the individuals over and over. So I think that's really cool, and I would recommend people try that out and learn it, and it's really fun too. So I think in designing, if you're doing a project on your own, you're kind of reliant on your own skills at some point. You can't just rely on artists to do everything, and if it's your vision. So this game was really just my vision, and I just had to keep working at things, and graphic design really wasn't my strong suit. But if I wasn't happy with something and I couldn't communicate it and I couldn't get help with that, I was looking out for help with other graphic designers and friends, and a lot of our art is just a mix of things, like our triangle symbol, the sort of spiral behind Outchasers, that was done by a graphic designer in Sweden. And then the logo was done by a friend, the font and then the outline of that was done by a friend who I had known for a long time. And then the equipment cards I had done probably hundreds of iterations on, and I talked to multiple graphic designers, but I ended up talking to Paul Sang, who's another tabletop designer who I met at Gen Con, and he did some really cool designs that helped me push the idea, and then I had to really finish it up, and then I worked with Brett, our illustrator, to really tune all the graphics to make them look really clear and sharp and nice. It was a long process, but I'm really happy with where we are now. I think the cards are a huge challenge, so I think they've turned out really well, and they're for how much information's on the cards, I think they're really clear, and I'm really excited about it. But here I'll go through some of the older designs and show you some of the process pieces that we just have printed out on our printer at home. So the first version of the game, we had resource cards separate from equipment cards, and then we had three-way equipment cards, which were super busy. And then we also used symbols that I found on some image I really liked online, but each card had a unique image on it, which was a real pain to deal with. But then our next iteration, I started unifying all the factions and taking off the unique symbols. And then eventually we took off the split out cores, and then we ditched resource cards. And then we were working in black and white with concept art from our artist who, he wouldn't do color until we were really happy with the design. So for a while we were just using all black and white images. And then we got to the version you probably saw at Comic-Con if you played there. And that's where the backgrounds are solid colors, and we used really thin white lines. And that one really wasn't clear enough because what we were trying to do was be really minimalistic with it. But really when you're designing a game, icons are super important. So we ended up replacing those and adding icons so that people could see really what those numbers are without having to ask or having to remember. You just see an image and you know. And so then now you can see our final designs. So with our final designs, we really wanted to make Trap really a visual thing, so you can just flip the card and know it's a trap. Just, you know, even seeing it from across the table, you don't need to read the text. So that was one of the biggest ones. And then we did a lot of printing and playing with the cards and really getting the feel of it, because you can't really know how it's going to feel on the computer screen. You have to have it in your hand to really understand what it's like. So when we would put equipment cards down, it looked really strange to have the back of the cards be vertical and then you put it horizontal. And so what we did was we switched and added a second card back that is horizontal for equipment cards, which makes it a lot more intuitive. So if you put down an equipment card, you'll know how to flip it right, so that all the text lines up, and it looks more intuitive as you're playing it. And the same thing is true with the numbers on the cards and their locations, because there were a few times we'd have numbers on the cards, and if you fanned the cards in your hand, it would totally hide a bunch of them, and you'd have to pull one out individually. But since we've rotated them, it kind of fans a lot more naturally and feels a lot better. And that's something that I think is really cool about, you know, tabletop design, is the tactile elements of it, and really the experience of it. Those kind of small changes make a big difference when you're playing, and I think that's really cool. So the next video, I'm going to talk more about the game design of Outchasers, and, you know, some really specific decisions we made, and so maybe some specific cards, some pilot abilities that were really hard, and then you'll hear from my co-designer Nick. And then we'll also talk about the narrative design and really what we were going for as far as the story of Outchasers, because that was something that was not really my strong suit. So we ended up bringing on a narrative designer named James Pianka, and so he's going to talk a little bit about that. So after that video, we'll have another video talking about art, and you can see some of Brett's process in doing the art for Outchasers. And that will lead us up to the launch of our Kickstarter. So for all you out there that like this video, stay tuned for the next one, where we're going to talk about more game design challenges, some more stuff that you probably didn't know about Outchasers, some specific cards, and also we'll be giving away a secret gift. So if you'd like this video and share it with your friends, I'd love to give you a digital fist bump and say thank you. All right, see you guys. If you have any questions, definitely get at me. I love hearing from you guys. I want to know, I want to talk to you. Just let me know in the comments below or on social media anywhere. So for all you out there that like this video, stay tuned for the next video, where we're going to do a video about videos.